Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
It is 7:06. It's O'Connor and Company this Tuesday morning in your nation's capital as we sort of unpack the headlines, help you make sense of it all. Don't believe the hype. Don't believe all the noise that you're hearing from. God, stop watching cable news, honestly. There's so many options for you for deep dive, intelligent analysis here on talk radio and on podcasts. Wherever Julie Gunlock shows up, you know it's going to be intelligent analysis. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning.
Coming up at 7:35, Nick Minock is going to join us on Channel 7 about that disturbing story out of Arlington Public Schools. 8:05, Don Bentley is the new author of the Mitch Rapp series of books. He's also a former Army Apache helicopter, and he wants to shed some light on this Black Hawk issue, especially some of the things that have been said about one of the pilots. And at 8:35, Samantha Jo Roth, who covers Congress for the Washington Examiner, and Julie Gunlock and I are now very happy to welcome to the program a friend of the show, Eli Lake. Of course, he's a columnist for the Free Press, a growing, burgeoning enterprise, and he's also a contributing editor, commentary, and host of Breaking History podcast, a very fun podcast. Hey, Eli, thanks for joining us.
Harry, Julie, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
I know that your heart is broken over U.S. aid not being able to fund transgender musicals in Ireland, but we'll get to that and the heartache over that in just a moment. First, though, I think the top story is that Bibi Netanyahu's in town, very first foreign leader to visit President Trump in Washington. What do you expect the conversation to be like today as we have this ceasefire, but it's certainly a fragile ceasefire in the Middle East?
Well, I mean, we should just note that something like 4 years ago, or a little more than 4 years ago, Trump was furious at Netanyahu, if you remember, when he was one of the first leaders to congratulate Joe Biden for the 2020 election. So this really does show that the hatchet is buried, and that, for maybe we might learn of some personal diplomacy over the last 4 years. But it could also just be that, Trump has a very clear-eyed view, particularly of the Middle East. He knows who America's allies are, and he is working past it. But I just think it's important to note that it wasn't peaches and cream between Netanyahu and Trump 4 years ago, and they've obviously repaired that relationship, and that is a very good thing.
Go on, Eli. Go ahead. Sorry.
As for what's on the agenda right now, my hope, and I think based on some of the comments from Netanyahu before he left, is that there has to be a really serious conversation about Iran. Mm-hmm. And the conversation about Iran is not the typical one about maximum pressure and, UN sanctions, U.S. sanctions, and all of that. We are well beyond that point. Israel, in the last few months, if you remember, going back to the fall, has blinded the Iranian defenses by taking out its air defense system and its missile defense, or its air defense system. It has crippled the proxies that Iran was using for a kind of blackmail if ever someone would attack its nuclear facilities. And its nuclear facilities are there. There is a window that I don't know how long that window will remain open. And now's the time to take out the big problem. That, to me, is more important than the status and what phase we are in of the ceasefire in Gaza. Gaza, is a tragedy right now, and we should recognize I'm very pro-Israel, but it's a tragedy for most Palestinians. It's a tragedy for the Jewish state, and it's a terrible thing. And eventually, the demons in Hamas need to be driven out of Gaza, either in coffins or to the Isle of Elba. I don't care, but they cannot run that place. And that's very important. But let's keep our eye on the ball. The big problem is Iran and its nuclear blackmail, and there's an opportunity, for at least for now, until that window closes, to take that out without much retaliation. And I think that Trump has to work with Israel to take the lead, but give Israel the support, intelligence, the munitions necessary to do the job and really and take out the nuclear program.
I'm curious what your thoughts are about Trump. He was signing some EOs earlier this week, and he took the tip of his pen and compared it to the table, saying that Israel's very small. And this was in response to whether he would support the annexation of the West Bank by Israel. It sounded that way. It sounded like he was very concerned about sort of, the land that Israel is comprised of and that it does need to be expanded. What were your thoughts on that?
Well, of course, I think, I agree. He was making a common sense and a very important point that's lost, which is that, the discourse around the Arab-Israeli conflict is that Israel is this kind of aggressor state. It's accused of land grabbing and so forth. But if you look at the entire region, obviously, something like 99% of the land is in the hands of Arab nations.
Yep.
So in that respect, I think he's kind of adding much needed perspective to it. But there's another thing that's going on here, too. And that is, the last time you saw serious talk about Israel annexing the West Bank was on the eve of the Abraham Accords.
Mm-hmm.
I think in some ways that is a strategic move. What you're saying is, the alternative to regional peace deals, which I think is a huge priority in getting the Saudis on board, and I think the Saudis want to do it. I think Trump wants to do. I think it's going to happen. But it's important for Israel to say, if we don't get these other kinds of guarantees by better diplomatic relations with our neighbors, then we're going to have to do other things that are going to be more disruptive. So I think that's where that annexation stuff is. I think it's kind of a negotiating gambit. And I think, it's important. And I think, by the way, it also kind of puts some things in perspective with Gaza, too, right? It's unacceptable if Hamas thinks it's going to remain in power, which is why I'm so skeptical. I want the hostages to be returned, but that is unfortunately the only leverage these terrorists have at this point.
Speaking with Eli Lake, he's a columnist for the Free Press, and he also contributes to the Breaking History podcast. Eli, we're learning that U.S. aid was giving money to Hamas, funding them to the tune of pretty hefty American tax dollars. And that's just part of the problem with U.S. aid. And I recognize that U.S. aid has in the past been used as a very effective diplomatic and, yes, sort of an espionage tool as well to get interest into countries and to help build up some support from areas in a country that otherwise would be hostile to us. But can you shed a little light about what this U.S. aid has turned into? Because we're hearing some of the things that it's been funding, and also the reaction about Trump and the Doge team sort of having some scrutiny over where tax dollars are going. Their reaction has been so over the top that it really makes it look like they're hiding something.
Heavens to Betsy, right? Scrutiny from the new administration. Oh, never.
Right. How dare they? It's a coup.
Yeah. Okay, so a couple points here. Can we all learn a lesson in the media from what just happened in the last 24 hours with the tariff wars with Canada and Mexico? Yeah. Can we understand that this is kind of how this guy Donald Trump operates? He announces the 25% tariffs, and unfortunately there was real ramifications in the stock market, which are not good. But what was going on there was that this was a negotiating tactic. What was he really interested in? Well, he was really interested in, let's leave Canada out of this for a second because that's a little less defensible. But he wanted Mexico to say, all right, you made this commitment, really now do it, and send your military to the border and start taking out the people bringing the fentanyl poison into our country. That's an admirable goal. If he accomplished it by kind of saying, I'm the bull in the china shop, I'm going to break everything, good. That's we could use a little something like that. That's called, the Yiddish would call that sechel. That's street sense. You know what I mean? So that's the good side. The bad side is that, you can't just say you're going to, the reality is the proper way to approach USAID is with a scalpel. You need to cut out the ridiculous woke stuff that has, by the way, distracted it from its mission. You need to apply some scrutiny to certain aid programs that end up going to places like UNRWA or NGOs that are basically cutouts for Hamas. There are a lot of things, there's a lot of reform that is needed at USAID without throwing out the entire organization. My sense of and I don't have any inside information, just following the State Department and USAID for more than 2 decades, what I think you're going to see is going to end up happening is that it's just going to come under the authority of the State Department, which is good. Yeah. And by the way, other presidents have tried to do that, and it's been less dramatic. And we already saw it when Rubio, the Secretary of State, was named the acting administrator for the USAID. This is all good. For some reason, under President Biden, Samantha Power was a member of the cabinet as a separate I have no idea why they decided to do the org chart that way. But that's not the natural state of things. The natural state of things is the Secretary of State should make decisions about the details of this kind of thing, and it should come under the scrutiny of the political leadership of these bureaucracies. I know that's a crazy concept, but we live in a republic, people. That's the normal state of affairs, not the government that exists all the time and is a permanent administrative state gets to tell the people coming in who just won the election what skiffs they can go into. That is absurd, and the fact any journalist who went along with that as if that was the natural state of affairs should be ashamed of themselves. That is not what's supposed to happen. Now, on the other side, saying you're going to get rid of all these programs and things like Catholic Relief Services, of course you shouldn't do that, and I do not think that is what Elon Musk or Donald Trump is trying to do right now. But they wouldn't mind if people were so scared of their moves and their tweets and so forth that they think that's what's going to happen, and then you get some real change.
They should be ashamed of themselves. And if they had shame, Eli, they'd probably be ashamed. Eli, always good to talk to you. Thank you for shedding a little bit of common sense into our proceedings here. It is 7:18.
WMAL, making sense of the news. Live from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios. Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
So today, we've got a committee vote on Robert F. Kennedy Jr. This is the Senate Finance Committee. There's two committees that sort of hold sway over the Department of Health and Human Services. One is Finance, and that vote will be today. At 10 a.m., they'll be picking up that vote, and we shall see how that works. That, of course, because of the close nature of the makeup in the Senate, it's 14 Republicans, 13 Democrats, and he's hoping to get Kennedy as a majority on that panel. The Trump Energy Secretary was confirmed last night. Chris Wright is now your Secretary of Energy. He's a former CEO of an energy company that did quite a bit of fracking.
That's nice.
So that's a good thing. Yes. We like that. Final vote for Pam Bondi as Attorney General went along party lines with a strict 52-46 vote. There was no filibuster there, and so now I guess there's one more final vote for the confirmation, right?
Yeah.
The debate was ended. That's the cloture, and now the final vote will be scheduled for. I'm looking for it here. I think it's today. But we'll ask Samantha Jo Roth, who covers Congress for the Examiner. So that's where that one's sitting, and that leads us to Tulsi Gabbard, the other nomination that's sort of sitting on the fence right now, and it could go either way. There were some key Republicans who were very concerned about her inability to jump when they said jump by saying that Edward Snowden was a traitor. But I got to say, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, and it's like, we talked about it Friday, actually, I think. Edward Snowden was a criminal, and he broke the law, and he should be punished. But you can't deny that what he revealed
is important.
Changed American policy. He revealed that James Clapper, then the DNI, lied to the American people and lied under oath to that very.
I love that they're more outraged about Snowden than what Clapper did.
Exactly. They're not upset that James Clapper lied to them.
Right.
But they're upset that Tulsi Gabbard won't call Edward Snowden a traitor.
Clapper, an incredibly powerful government official, as opposed to Snowden, who's this whistleblower, right?
And never punished.
Yeah.
So she wrote an op-ed in Newsweek explaining why she won't call Edward Snowden a traitor. And she sort of mentioned some of the things that I just mentioned. But then she said, you know what? These people, you know what?
Did she really say that in the op-ed? You know what?
I'm paraphrasing. Kidding. She said it with a Hawaiian accent. Leave me alone. She said, you know what? These people, because I didn't toe the party line with Bashar al-Assad, because I was upset that Obama was funding al-Qaeda to overthrow Assad, because I was skeptical of the Russian collusion hoax and suggested that maybe there was a little bit more to the narrative that we were hearing from Biden over Ukraine and Russia. They called me a traitor. Yeah. They said I was guilty of treason. Hillary Clinton and anonymous leaks from the very intelligence community that I would like to now have some oversight over. They used that word on me.
They did.
And so forgive me for not playing fast and loose, but treason under the Constitution means that you are subject to the death penalty.
Yes.
That's what they said about me.
Yes.
I am not so willing to throw that word around lightly. And that's why, yes, Edward Snowden's a criminal. He should be dealt with. But I'll leave treason up to a jury. Thank you very much.
The Democrats, a party that loves to throw around nuance, every 10 seconds, sure doesn't believe in nuance when it comes to Tulsi Gabbard's nuanced position on these very complicated issues.
She got Susan Collins of Maine to support her, and I think that's going to be a game changer. Right now, it still seems too close to call, but if I had to guess, I think Tulsi Gabbard gets confirmed.
Agreed.
And that is huge.
Agreed.
Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
It's a great Tuesday morning here on O'Connor and Company. Thanks for tuning in at 7:37. Coming up, we've got more guests to delight you. Starting at 8:05 with Don Bentley. Now he is the new author of the Vince Flynn Mitch Rapp series. He's also a retired pilot for the Army helicopter pilot, and he'd like to shed a little bit of facts on what we're hearing about the crew of that Black Hawk that crashed in the Potomac. 8:35, Samantha Jo Roth covering Congress for the Examiner. I'm Larry O'Connor alongside Julie Gunlock.
Good morning.
Let's get right to it.
The district leadership failed to take the report seriously.
I'm asking for a full investigation by an outside party.
The person wasn't arrested until October, and since October, there's been no public statement by this board outside of Duran's statement and what's been said here tonight. That's a huge gap of time where nothing has been substantively changed within the policy to make sure that this doesn't happen again.
Angry parents, concerned parents, frightened parents sounding off at last night's Arlington County School Board meeting. That's specifically about this transgender individual who was a repeat sex offender who had been exposing himself in the girls' locker room while utilizing the swimming pool facility there. Joining us right now is Nick Minock, reporter of WJLA-TV, Channel 7, right here in Washington. Nick, thank you, and thank you for covering this story so well. Always appreciate you.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Julie. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. At this meeting, the school board obviously heard it from the parents. Superintendent spoke about this. First of all, what policy changes have been put in place here as a result of this terrifying story?
Right. So Superintendent Francisco Duran of Arlington County announced new security protocols at that school board meeting on January 30th. That's last Thursday. One of the security protocols he says he's going to update, and he says this will be implemented towards the end of February, towards the end of this month, is 100% ID checks for individuals who check into schools during school hours, but also during pool facilities outside of school hours against the sex offender database. So he says that will be implemented towards the end of this month. One policy they are not changing is the policy that allowed 58-year-old Richard Cox to go into the women's locker room. That policy in Arlington County, passed by the school board some years ago, allows individuals who identify as the opposite sex to use the opposite sex locker rooms and bathrooms. So it's based on gender identity. If somebody identifies as the opposite gender despite their biological sex, they can use those facilities, and that's something the Arlington School Board is not changing at the moment.
Well, I don't understand then. So the only policy change is asking for an ID?
That's the one they announced, correct.
So I'm sorry, on your ID, I don't know this, so I'm asking you, on the ID, does it say if you're a convicted pedophile?
Well, I think how this may work is they may put the individual's name into the sex offender database and see if an alert came up.
So now so now this person at the front, I mean, I've been into my children's, my kids used to go to public school, and, you know, you take your ID and you go over to a security person who gives you a sticker. They now need to do they're going to have this person now check a sex offender registry. I mean, it just seems easier to just, not I personally, I'd like to go back to the point of not allowing adults that are not students into these pools. I mean, I know that's a whole different issue, but the fact that all you have to do is show an ID, I mean, I just feel like this is not going to be enough, Nick. I mean,
Nick. I mean,
Mr. Cox, he is known to show false identification. Yeah. That's one of his charges. So I don't know, and the school system hasn't told me this, and I've asked if he showed a fake ID to the pool staff. Mm-hmm. But I know he is charged with showing fake ID to police to avoid prosecution in this case. Yeah. So if you show a fake ID, it may not come up on the sex offenders list.
Exactly. If you're willing to break the law against exposing yourself to minors, maybe you're willing to break the law against carrying a fake ID. And I guess the other question here, and again, Nick, I don't expect you to have all the answers, is let's say somebody's name does come up on the ID check. Is this a security personnel?
Right,
I mean, are they going to enforce something? What's the end result? It sounds like they're just sort of trying to placate parents and saying that we're going to implement this new policy. And finally, by the way, at the end of the month, I mean, why is this difficult to implement starting now? Right.
Right.
Did you hear anything more from them about this?
Well, they gave brief statements. The superintendent talked about the security protocols with the ID checks. The school board chair, Mary Kadera in Arlington, also spoke. She spoke about the Arlington School Board's awareness of the issue. And before I tell you what that is, let me back up. We've heard reports that this individual was visiting the women's locker room at Washington Liberty High School for at least 5 months since June. And in September, early September, he was exposing himself to women and girls in the girls' locker room, as according to women and girls we spoke to. Those women and girls spoke to Mary Kadera, asked them to address the issue. But this is what Mary Kadera said. This was her response. She said that she put up signage and guidance, and that signage encouraged people to cover up their private parts, to observe locker room etiquette. So this individual, so new signs were put up outside the locker rooms, right? But this individual was still allowed to use the locker room for weeks, and he wasn't arrested until late October.
Well,
and go ahead.
I mean, in fairness, Nick, we know pedophiles always abide by signage. So, I mean, thank goodness.
And they're slaves to etiquette.
Right.
They really are.
Right.
I mean, it's like...
Right, exactly. Oh, wow.
Just more frustrations, I think, for parents.
And the father, you just heard from off the top of this block was saying, look, we haven't heard from you guys, the school board or the superintendent, for months. The man was arrested in late October. This school board meeting is now happening January 30th. So during that time, no policy changes were made. Mm-hmm. They knew this individual was arrested. The school board and the superintendent haven't spoke, at least until we reported this incident. And now they're making policy changes. So now there's a debate right now going on with parents who are on both sides of this debate. Should they be changing their locker room policy to prohibit people of the opposite sex from going into sex-segregated locker rooms and bathrooms?
Wait, I can't let this go without comment. I was about to wrap with you, Nick, but you just said on both sides of the issue. I want to know who's on the other side. Is there some suggestion
Obviously
here
the
that
school
parents
board,
who are...
Larry.
Well, is there a suggestion that the parents who are expressing concern about this are in some... We've seen this play out in Loudoun County, Nick. Are they saying that they're being bigoted or phobic? Are they taking this as an assault on the trans community or gay community versus actually obvious, logical, common sense moves to protect children from
pedophiles.
Offenders?
Well, I posted some of those parents' comments on my X account if people want to listen to them. One parent said that, in their opinion, the sex of the individual, the gender identity of the individual is irrelevant to the conversation, is what they said. Another parent said that sex predators do exist, and there's not much they think can be done to stop this from happening again, and that probably will happen again. Another parent said to the school board, please uphold the transgender locker room and bathroom policies the school board passed some years ago. So that's what they're saying.
It's
that's more important.
Yeah, it really is hard to stomach.
All right. We got to
Really-
leave it there, Nick. I appreciate you covering
really
this story
appreciate
in the
your
very sober
work.
and fact-based way you are.
Yeah.
And we'll expect follow-ups, that's for sure. Thank
Thanks,
you, sir.
Nick.
Oh, there will be. Thank you. Take care.
Later this morning on the Chris Plant Show, New Jersey's Democrat governor has an illegal alien living in his garage and is daring Trump to come get her. 9 a.m. on WMAL.
7:50 now on O'Connor and Company. Yesterday, President Trump welcomed the Florida Panthers to the White House for a ceremony celebrating their championship and in the National Hockey League, the Stanley Cup champions. It should be noted that our 51st state, Canada, has yet to produce a Stanley Cup champion in over 30 years. I'm told that Canada is really big on hockey, but for some reason they can't produce a championship team. Might be because all the best players want to play in America because despite how bad our taxes are, it's nothing compared to Canada. I know it's shocking. You would think that the best hockey players in the world would want to flock to Canada for the free healthcare system, but apparently it's not so great. Apparently they'd rather take their chances with our healthcare system and keep their money. That said, the Florida Panthers showed up at the White House, and something very cool happened when President Trump walked into the East Room. Cut 23. Listen.
And I love all these ties. This is so cute. These people. I walked in and I said, I think they like Trump. I like them.
In fact, they all dressed like Trump. They were all wearing either a dark black or dark blue suit like President Trump does with a white dress shirt and a red tie.
Yes.
It was an amazing scene.
It was great.
It's just hilarious. They
is.
all dressed in a Trump costume.
Yes.
You gotta love
Well,
that.
you gotta understand how mad this makes the liberals, though. To just have some fun.
Oh, yes.
Just have some fun and show them a little respect.
Stop
and...
normalizing him. Stop normalizing him.
Exactly.
This is not normal. Panthers star forward Matthew Tkachuk. Sure, whatever. He spoke on behalf of the team. Cut 24.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Mr. President, for having us today. We greatly appreciate it. And being one of the few Americans, who loves this country so much, this is such an incredible day for myself. And, we wake up every day and really grateful to be an American. So thank you.
Larry.
When was the last time you heard that
No
from a professional
kidding.
athlete?
Ugh.
Yeah.
What a great moment.
Now, was he saying that he's one of the few Americans who's proud to be an American, or he's one of the few Americans on the team? Because let's face it, oftentimes hockey teams are made up of foreign players.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think he meant he's one of the few Americans on the team.
Maybe.
Yeah.
It was just a great moment, very positive. Gosh, it's really nice to just have these really positive moments and pro-American moments.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with it. It's great. It's great to see. And look, these are the guys who
not
influence
comparing
young
Donald
men.
Trump the man. I'm not comparing Donald Trump the man to Ronald Reagan the man, but I am the mood and the vibe. Does feel very Reagan-y.
And we've talked about this. I have young teenage sons. You have, very young sons.
I have young teenage sons.
And it is so nice that this is the world, that they're sort of becoming more aware of politics in the world and that they hear these pro-America messages. It's really nice. Really nice.
7:53.